thousands of years. And on behalf of the university, I acknowledge and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And I invite all of you, all attendees, to acknowledge the traditional owners from where you're currently attending the event today. As Jane mentioned, a very warm welcome to all of our FBE students, but I'm also very pleased to welcome students coming from other faculties. Delighted to be here opening this inaugural event because it speaks to the universities and in fact the faculty's deep and very strong commitment to building a strong community where our diverse student cohort is enriched by global perspectives and our students are prepared for success as leaders, for change agents and as global citizens. Global's Career Week was actually envisaged prior to COVID-19, but undoubtedly the tone and content has shifted somewhat in the same way that workplaces around the world have had to dramatically shift the way they work, presenting both challenges and opportunities. We're actually very privileged today to have one of our very own BCom alumnus to speak to this. Yunhan Lee is joining us from KL in Malaysia, and he's currently a director with Deloitte Consulting Southeast Asia's human capital practice. With 14 years of human capital consulting experience under his belt, Yunhan has helped many leading organisations in the energy and resources sectors, the consumer and telco industries in ASEAN to unlock their potential. It's my understanding that Yunhan has not had a linear career journey himself, so I have no doubt he'll be imparting rich insights into forging a career in the global marketplace and in keeping with this year's theme of preparing for work in the new COVID-19 reality, how to navigate your own career journey in the current environment. I encourage you all to listen and to ask plenty of questions in the Q&A. It's a pleasure to have you all with us, and I'm now going to hand over to Yunhan, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Paul. A very good morning to all of you. And actually now it'll be about 12:30 past in Melbourne, right? Can everyone hear me all right? Is everything coming through well? All right, thanks, Jane.
All good, yeah.
All good, yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you all virtually today, and this is very much a new normal sort of keynote for me, especially. I usually do this physically in person, where I can see all of you on the other side, whether I'm boring you with some of the details, or whether you're listening rapidly and attention, or whether you've got any questions to me as well. Right? But I think with this difference, unfortunately, I'm not able to fly to Australia to see all of you in person. And I understand that the situation there in Melbourne still remains under lockdown. Hopefully, with the low number of cases now, things will be looking forward for all of you over here. I'm doing well in Kuala Lumpur, where the situation is so far still under control, but it's important for all of us to stay safe as part of this pandemic that we're all going through across the world. So in this new normal, I would like to do things a little bit differently, if you don't mind. I'm going to co-create this keynote together with you. So I've prepared some things that I'd like to share with you, but again, it'll be so much more interactive if you get to crowdsource or co-create this together with me as well. So what would you like to hear from me today? As Professor Paul has mentioned a few things about me and my background, I'll explain a bit more about my career journey. In the meantime, as you think about what you'd like to ask or what you'd like to hear from me, Jane has set up the polling question right over here on Poll Everywhere. So please feel free to chip in and pump in as much as you like, and I'll try to skew or change the direction of what I'm about to share with you today based on that as well. All right? So a little bit about me. As Paul mentioned, in terms of my career, it's not exactly a linear one, but I'll just first introduce myself as to who I am, right? So I am a son, a brother, a husband, and a father to a very lovely 2.5-year-old daughter. I am a trained accountant, as I'll share with you shortly on what I graduated with from the University of Melbourne. I'm also an alumni volunteer here in Malaysia, so a bit of a shameless plug. If any of you are listening in and who are Malaysians and are planning to come back, there's a very active alumni community here in Malaysia. Do get in touch with me. Happy to connect you with a group over here for networking or for career opportunities as well. I'm also a classic car enthusiast and restorer, so that's what I do in my free time as a hobby. I'm an amateur photographer and videographer, so I've set up this little thing here that I've got going with my latest toy that I bought, which is a GoPro Hero Black 9, for those of you who are tech inclined. I'm also a budding YouTuber, set up a channel of my own. I do own a hotel, funnily enough. I am an amateur magician. Don't ask me to share a trick now with you. I'll fail quite spectacularly at that. I am a pianist. I do play the piano. I love musical theatre. I used to be involved in dramas and plays when I was over at the University of Melbourne. Had plenty of fun in that arena. And last but not least, I am a director in Deloitte Consulting here in Southeast Asia in the human capital practice. So that's who I am in total, in a nutshell, right? And I have to say, I'm not particularly good at all of them, as what I just told you. So I'm 35 years old this year. And how did I get here to where I am? I graduated back in 2006 with a Bachelor of Commerce majoring in accounting and finance. And I first started my career in PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC as it's now called. Right? They came all the way to Melbourne to recruit, and they gave me an offer at that time to start my career over in Malaysia. I didn't give it much of a second thought. Right? The first offer that I got, I just took it, all because I was pretty much quite impatient to start on my career journey as it is. Right? And before I explain as to why on my career journey moving forward, why I accepted that to begin with. When I was young, I pursued a Bachelor of Commerce and majored in accounting and finance solely with the intent of making more money. Right? Why else would you do a Bachelor of Commerce degree if you're not interested in the subject of money, making more money, becoming a multi-millionaire yourself one day? And that's pretty much the primary motivation as to why I chose that path at that point in time. So back then I thought, well, you know, many of the CEOs of companies were accountants or chartered accountants. So therefore the path must be to get your accounting degree, get your CPA, ICAA, or whatever the certification it is in your field, and then progress your way up your career and become a CEO one day and retire rich, right? So that's like, at that time to me, the dream of why I chose or why I did what I did. And therefore, I chose accounting because that was the more straightforward path as far as I could see, despite my mother's very best efforts of convincing me otherwise, right? But typical me, you know, 18 years old, 19 years old, thought I knew everything in the world. Why would I listen to my mom, right? Even though she was the head of faculty for auditing in the University of Malaya, well, I thought she didn't know me, right? As much as I thought I knew myself. So I then went into PricewaterhouseCoopers in PwC and did my career there and started auditing, right? And about 6 months down the road, I figured out, or I just found that I could not continue, despite all the internships I did, despite all that the convincing I did myself, I could not continue in that line as it is. And then I decided to look elsewhere. And one of my friends told me, like, well, in university, you really like to do project work, right? There was a subject called management practicum, and I think right now it might be called business practicum for those of you there. And they said, well, you know, why don't you try consulting? Right? Consulting is similar to that. You might like it. So I went and applied to many consulting firms, whether it's McKinsey, Boston, Bain, Accenture, you name it. I applied to most of them. And Accenture came back with the offer at that time. And they gave me an offer for a position called human performance, an analyst in human performance. And I thought, you know, what the hell does human performance mean? Right? I had no clue what I was getting into. And I just joined Accenture, and I just thought that if I didn't like it, 6 months later, 2 months later, or 2 years later, I could quit and do something else, right? And lo and behold, I was there for close to 10 years in Accenture before I decided to move on my career into another firm, into Ernst & Young, or EY as it is called. And then when I joined EY, I was helping the firm build, back then it was a very small people advisory services practice, and I moved on to grow it to a 30 to 40 headcount personnel as it's now today. And I left Ernst & Young just a few months ago, and I started in Deloitte in July this year, actually, in the middle of COVID-19. They gave me an offer to take on a Southeast Asia position. Yeah? And that's why I landed up myself here within Deloitte and speaking to you today. Right? And that's pretty much the career journey that I went through for the time. And I can't imagine doing anything else. And truthfully, I did stumble upon my career. I didn't study for HR or organization design or anything of that sort. And pretty much my first stint into Accenture is what led me to this path, right? And I'll describe to you what I do in a nutshell, right? So I basically help organizations, government agencies, or governments in general with their human capital issues, right? So basically, people are my problem. Whatever it is pertaining to how do I help employees perform better? How do I make them more motivated? How do organizations restructure to become more efficient? How do we change the culture of organizations to be more receptive to digital technologies, for example? How do we create more agile teams in organizations and squads? So there's so many things that I do in the space of people that I think, in the past 14 years that I have doing this, there's still a lot for me to learn. So this is the opportunity that I have to share with you what little I know in the space of human capital and what impacts that would have to the jobs today, right? So I've got the screen here on some of the questions that are coming up. So around working in professional services. Okay, hang on, so how do I manage my work and my personal life, working in Asia where there's very little time for the latter? What are some of the key listing points in shaping your career journey? Okay. What's the difference between each of the big four firms? Okay, if I have time, I can share a little bit about that as well. Would you consider exiting to industry? And if so, what industry would you like to get into? I'll tell you that at the end of the session. Right? Thanks for that. Okay. Any other responses, Jane, on the screen?
No, they're there.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank you for the questions. Happy to share a lot of these things with you for today as to what I prepared. Now, if I think about the questions that you have around COVID-19, the job market, the downturn, and how that impacts work. I saw a question up there on the chat as well around working from home, how our industry is going to be impacted by that. So thank you for that question. I do have a perspective on that will hopefully be helpful. Some of you may have more straightforward questions around, should I move, should I go, which country is best for me at this time, which industry should I be looking at, is my CV good enough? And all these are very, very relevant questions for you at this point in time, thinking about the next stage in your life, which is your career journey that you're about to embark on. So I'll take this opportunity to share with you a few thoughts that would hopefully help you in thinking through what's next for you, right? And what I'm about to share with you, it's not so much business, corporate, global macroeconomics type of things, right? It's something that's more fundamentally human, as I would like to call it. So I've got here as what I'll call the 3 Ps, right? I'll share with you what those 3 Ps are, which you can hopefully take away with you and see how that fits into your frame of mind and your own personal life journey as well, right? So the first P that I'll start off with is around perspective. So what I mean by perspective, and that ties into how organizations are changing or how industry is also changing. And I'd like to take you back way towards before the Industrial Revolution, if you think about it. In the early 1900s or the early 20th century, before technology all came about, or before the Industrial Revolution came about, society was very much agrarian, right? Everyone was in their towns, their villages, basically doing everything that they could to survive, right? The work that they did, they were transferred down from generation to generation. If you are a blacksmith, chances are your father was a blacksmith. If you're a farmer, chances are your father was a farmer as well. And everyone did what they could to put food on the table. So that was the situation during the agrarian society at that point in time. If you fast forward a little bit to pre-World War, post-World War I, pre-World War II, and post-World War II, the Industrial Revolution pretty much happened, right? Whereby people pulled resources together, companies were formed, you've got capital, you've got human capital involved, and you've got workers producing goods and services, right? Out of that, the career was born in a way, or professions were also born out of that, as what we know today. And that gave people a lot of certainty, if you may, over a career journey, a career path. It was sort of designed that you came out from school, you went to university, you got a degree, you got a job, you had a career, for most people pretty much for life. You retired, and then you figure out what you want to do after you retire, and then you die, right? So that's pretty much the gist of the journey for many of us for the past several decades, in fact. And I know it's a bit extreme, and I'm oversimplifying things a lot in that situation. But when you look at the situation now today, fast forward to today, most of society have got out of the cycle of poverty, of disease, of starvation, right? And by disease, I mean most of the diseases of past, not COVID-19 today. But that has created a space whereby careers made sense, you could plan for it moving forward. But today, with the technology revolution, what that has done, whether it's YouTube, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all the technologies within AI, robotics, automation, things have moved so fast whereby the notion of a career for life is effectively gone, right? Whatever that was previously inaccessible is now accessible at your fingertips. And even take this, for example, live streaming this to all of you. You used to have to go to a TV studio to do this. Now I can just set it up at my office or at home and connect with all of you, live stream wherever you are in the world. That was not possible just a decade ago. Right? And technology has made all these resources so accessible to the common person at your fingertips. And now it's leveled the playing field a lot and really challenged the status quo. And all of a sudden now, just like back in the days in the agrarian society, we need to do everything we can do to survive, right? With a few differences, but essentially it's resulted in all of us trying to do as much as we can to stay ahead, to stay afloat, and to survive in this really uncertain world as we see today. So if you think about what that means for jobs of the future, how that's going to change, you might be thinking, oh, with technology, jobs are going away. And one of you asked about working from home and how is it going to be outsourced to other countries? Yes, outsourcing is a trend, right? And robotics is also a trend. It doesn't mean that when you outsource work to another country. You might outsource it to a non-human worker. Right? Robots can do things so much faster. And what I mean by robots is that it's not the physical machine robots that you might be used to seeing. It's robots that sit on your computer, on your desktop here, right? That can emulate what a human can do, like keying in password to a system, keying in forms in Microsoft Word document, filling up a PDF, sending an email, checking a form, coming back, sending it back with a written email with revisions and for someone else to look into it. Robots can be programmed to do all of that. Your student admissions process, your even your grading systems, perhaps, right? When you graduate, your recruitment forms, your CVs, might not be read by a human today. A lot of companies now are using robots and artificial intelligence to actually read and screen your CVs, right? So if you say, is your CV good enough? You have to ask, is it good enough for a robot, right? When it's looking through the amount of CVs that you're sending in. So a lot of these jobs people might think are going away, but I don't think they are. In the sense that I don't think there will be fewer jobs in the future for people. If you think about this, right, if I ask you a question, what does a data scientist and a Zumba instructor have in common, right? These are two very distinct jobs. The only thing that they have in common is that they didn't exist about 5 years ago or a decade ago. Right? These jobs didn't exist back then, but now they do. The thing is, humans have an insatiable need, or you can't satisfy human desire, right? It's limitless. And if humans can think of something, can imagine something, can desire for something, there would be someone who can fulfill that and make a living out of it, right? YouTube didn't exist before. Now you've got content created for so many people and you're on your phones all your time as a result. People didn't demand for this before, but now they do. And organizations are struggling with the concept of jobs as it is, right? Governments as well. And largely because I think jobs are a very convenient, if not lazy way to categorize people into buckets, right? For all those of you familiar with the Asian joke that parents always ask their kids to become a doctor, lawyer, accountant, or engineer, and nothing else, I think that notion is kind of gone today, right? As I introduced myself earlier, I'm more than one facet of something that I can do that would help others, that will contribute to society differently. And I think if you're going to look really to the extreme of what I think jobs would revolve around in the future, it's only around two things. It's either around people or around technology. Well, it could be around a combination of both, but generally these are the two things that I believe jobs would revolve around. So people being emotional, complex beings, you've got to be skilled at problem solving around people, right? Having empathy, connecting with emotions, having social EQ, and that is a skill set that is not exhausted because humans today don't understand humans, right? You can't replicate a human brain or replicate AI to replicate human emotions. It's not possible today, and humans can't even understand how our brains work at the beginning, at this point in time. The other part is around technology, right? If you're looking at jobs around technology, you're looking at things around continuous learning and fast-paced innovation, where you're constantly changing things as you go, right? People used to learn C++, now it's Python, tomorrow is going to be another sort of code base as we talk about. And that is the thing that's going to be driving human advancement for the foreseeable future, right? So just these two things, technology and people. So COVID-19 literally destroyed life as we know it. Right? Working from home, I think, is just the beginning. Air travel is also another thing that's already disrupted as it is. And it's also upended many social structures as we know today. And I dare say that you likely would belong to a generation that will not retire. And it's a bit hard to understand that because we all say, oh, I want to retire at 55, I want early retirement. But I don't think the concept of retirement can exist today, right? For a few reasons. You have a generation that is aging, right? The human population generally is aging across many countries, Australia included as well, Japan being the most extreme of the examples today. With an aging population and a population that is reducing when it comes to the working age, you have to figure out, or society has to figure out a way to constantly keep itself working. Right? And I don't think for many of us we can effectively retire, and the concept of retirement may pretty much be quite meaningless as well. So we've got to come back to the fundamentals around what jobs are. Essentially, they're something that's made out of tasks that you do. And we cannot run away from what makes us fundamentally human as such. So before we proceed to the next P after this, there's a quick poll that I'd like to ask all of you. And Jane, if you could help me around the next polling question. It's about a short picture, right, of a potential future that for some of you, or for all of you, if you're inclined to this. So would this be a picture of success for you? You're in your early 40s, chances are a lot of you on your 20s, early 20s at this point in time. You're the CEO of a major multinational corporation, overseeing more than 5,000 employees, over 8 offices as it is, right? And you're married with 2 kids, you're fit, you're healthy, and is this really a picture of success for you? I'd like to hear from you, right? So there are a few options there: strongly agree, somewhat disagree, and strongly disagree. So I'll pause for a few moments to answer, get some responses to this question. So I think we've got 4 responses so far, 5, a few more. See a few more on the agree side of things, that this could be a future for you. Somewhat agree, strongly agree. Okay. So it looks like that most of you see this as a picture of success, right? Or an end state that you want to arrive at. To be successful, you've got a good career, you've got a good title, you've got a good family, and this is something that many of you do aspire to, looking from the results here. Right? This story is based on a real person, and someone actually did achieve this as well. He was one of the youngest CEOs in the world of a multinational corporation. His name was Ranjan Das, and I say was because he's dead. He died at the age of 42 from a heart attack, right? And leaving behind a wife and 2 kids, which was quite tragic and unfortunate. And that is one potential future for some of us, right? And when you think about it, you know, it was a tragedy, it was a waste, it was an opportunity, it was sad. That is true. But again, you have to answer that question for yourself. Is that what you want as one of the potential futures for you, right? So when I talk about success, and over time in my career as I looked at it, it's very much more of the feeling of success rather than the end state of success, because there's no end to that, which brings me to my next P that I'd like to share with you, which is around purpose, right? So on purpose, this is something that ties towards resilience and grit. You may have heard that term several times on resilience and grit. How do we not give up? How do we keep persevering and moving forward? And oftentimes I find that while I do agree around having resilience and grit is a must-have trait to succeed, it is very difficult to achieve that without a strong sense of purpose, right? Why do I exist? Why do I do what I do? Purpose or meaning really gives us the push ahead in life. And the toughest question that we often don't ask ourselves is the question of why. Why do I do what I do? Why do I get up in the morning? Why do I want this job? Why do I want so much money? Why do I want this sort of successful career? Why? And the how and the what questions are very easy to answer. As graduates of the University of Melbourne, you're well trained to solve problems in that sense. But oftentimes we don't stop and think and pause and keep asking ourselves, why? And what I do, what I want to do. One way is to ask yourself is, what are you willing to do for free? Right? To give up your spare time, to work late nights for little or no pay or nothing at all. What are you willing to do for free? That more or less would lead towards answering the purpose as to why or what keeps yourself going. Right? So what is my purpose, you might answer, and you talk, some people ask the question on my career journey as it is, and why I keep doing what I do. So firstly, I grew up in a family of teachers, right? My mom was a teacher, a lot of my aunts and relatives were teachers, whether it's in primary school, secondary school, university, and that I think sort of rubbed off on me, and it's sort of imbued in my genes as well, that I do love teaching. And I do love sharing what I know, what I have, and I'm doing this out of my free time. I've been with this keynote session as well with all of you to set aside time in my work to share with you my insights around what I can or what is ahead for you as well. So if you think about that for what it means for you, does purpose really matter? I don't think purpose is something that's confined in the concepts of religion and philosophy anymore. It's spilled over into the corporate space in very, very big ways. Corporates are really embracing this reality as consumers are becoming more aware, or some of you may say the term more woke in that sense, and they're buying products from companies that are more sustainable, for example, buying products from organizations that give back more to society versus those who are just for pure rent-seeking or profit-seeking. And for example, is your purpose to become a millionaire? Right? Now, purpose, in the truest sense of form, is not something you can tick the box off and achieve. It's something that no matter how hard you work at, you will never be able to say, I've accomplished my purpose. So if teaching is my purpose, I would never be able to complete this task of teaching. There's always something more to teach. There's always someone else to teach. And I can never, no matter how many hours I work a day, accomplish that truly, no matter how long that I live. Right? So companies that embody a strong sense of this purpose are more likely than not to survive with strategies that can change, structures that can change, jobs that can change, but with the purpose remaining constant, they can evolve. And likewise for you as an individual, if you embody a strong sense of purpose as to why you do what you do, then no matter whether it's a pandemic, global structures changing, nothing much would bother you in that sense. Right? And last but not least, which is the last P that I'd like to share, which is on principles. And this came from an article that I read by Mark Manson, and I'll share with you a link in the chat shortly that you can read through as well. It's principles that help inform your decision-making framework. And the way Mark Manson put it in an article entitled How to Grow Up, he talked about it in three buckets, right? So first, as a child, second, as an adolescent, third, as an adult. Right? And his article is about how should people or humans as grow up to become adults. Right? So if you think about the child or how a baby responds, his or her actions are grounded in achieving gratification instantly, right? If there's pleasure, you get it, right? The child wants the ice cream, I'll grab it straight away, no matter the consequence of that. It might be bad for me, I don't care. If it gives me pleasure, I'm gonna have it right now. So that's where a child state of mind is. There are no principles, just pursuit of pleasure, immediate. The second stage is the adolescent category, whereby you have a set of principles that would lead towards a certain outcome. And you think about the ice cream in that case, if you're an adolescent, you'd hold off on the ice cream because there are consequences to that if you have it now, right? You would do well at your job for the promotion. You would then trade with people, be a nice person so you don't go to jail. You obey the law so you don't run foul of the law. And that's where a lot of us tend to operate as an adolescent, that you are constantly trading with society, that I do something only because to get something else in the future, right? And for this situation, a lot of us don't grow out of, and we're always thinking of what will other people think about us, or what will someone else think about, what will happen to me further down the road if I do this and I do that. And your principles change as a result of the consequence that comes for you. Now, to get to an adult is where you are only grounded in principles of your decision making. Whatever happens to you next, whether it's pleasure or pain, doesn't matter, as long as you make your decisions and you live your life solely by the principles that you have. And these are people who are willing to go to jail for the right thing, willing to sacrifice a lot for doing things right. And when it comes to jobs, what are you willing to quit for, right? You may be earning a huge pay, but if your company is not doing the right thing, are you willing to quit for that? Right? So those are principles that you need to ground yourself by. And here is really a sad fact, right? That very few people ever make it to adulthood, and fewer even manage to stay there. I wouldn't say that I myself am an adult in many of these respects. I'm still trying very hard to grow out myself and do the right things in my life. So just as a quick recap on the 3 Ps here. So I've talked about perspective, where change is really the only constant, and there'll be jobs, you just have to prepare for them even though you don't know what they are just yet. The second thing is around purpose. So life really is a marathon, not a sprint. So keep asking yourself the question of why. And lastly, principles. It's a journey towards growing up, and I do hope that we all eventually become adults, and it is better late than never. So that's all that I have to share for you today. I think it's next up is Q&A. Happy to address the questions as it is, and thank you very much for your time.
Let me test my memory. Perspective, purpose, and principles. So thank you. That is definitely a really lovely takeaway. We do have a question, and I think it's a really lovely way to kickstart the Q&A is, what are your recommendations for a purpose that can greatly benefit both ourselves and society as a whole?
All right. Thanks a lot, William. I appreciate that question. And I don't think society even has an answer to that. And I don't know, and I'm not arrogant enough to claim that I have the best answer in that way. I can answer from my perspective of what I think is a good purpose for myself that I can contribute. And it boils down to what can I do to help others be better. In one of the firms that I used to work with, it was a consulting firm where one of their core values is around stewardship. And stewardship means it's not about piloting a ship or being a captain of an industry or anything like that. Stewardship is about leaving a place in a better shape than what you encountered it when you first got there. And that really is what stewardship is about. And it really does echo even the university's motto as well, right? Around leaving a legacy behind. And that to me is fundamentally, if I think about it, what I like to subscribe to as a purpose. One of you asked, what's my dream job if I were to move to industry? I don't think I would want to move to industry, not because industry is bad, but it's because I know who I am and I know what I like to do and what drives me best. And I love being able to help as many people as possible. And the job that I have today allows me to do that with many clients across Southeast Asia in multiple industries, and to bring in perspectives from all across the world to help them. And if I were to look at a dream retirement job, if one day consulting is too much for me, if I don't want to continue this anymore, I would really love to spend my time teaching, as I said before, my purpose, right? And maybe a hint towards the University of Melbourne, if you've got an open teaching position, do let me know. I'll be keen to consider that as well further down the road when the time is right. And that to me, I think teaching and leaving a legacy is such a core purpose. I think a lot of us should imbue. If we had more people like that in society, I think we'd be in a much better state as compared to where we are today.
Thank you. So there you are, William. How can you leave your legacy? So there was a question that was asked right at the start of this session, and that was, as work from home becomes increasingly common amongst companies, what proportion of the workforce do you foresee Australian companies going offshore, and what industries do you think will be impacted the most?
Okay, so this was asked by Eugene, right? Thanks a lot, Eugene. I don't have a percentage for you with regards to outsourcing. What I can tell you is that this trend is on the increase with regards to outsourcing. And some companies that I spoke to of late, and this is what I see within Southeast Asia, where it is pretty much a hub for outsourcing organizations as well. And one of the large insurance companies that I know just recently also outsourced a big part of their IT workforce to one of the major business process outsourcing organizations as well. I think it's not going to end, right? The trend of globalization, the trend of outsourcing in some countries or companies, I see them outsourcing or planning to outsource as much as 50 to 60% of their own workforce, right? Solely because they have to remain competitive. And over the past few years, they've grown to such a size whereby they've got a lot of non-core businesses or non-core workforces in their organization, and that the only way for them to trim down without having to retrench people in that sense is through outsourcing to other firms who can offer them a better career. And if you think about it, it's a benefit towards better specialization for people. So for example, if you're in the IT field, on technology field today, and you are in the IT department of a corporate, right? What sort of career would you have if you love to do IT work, if you love to do technology, if you love to do analytics or business process reengineering type of work? There may not be much of a career if you think of working in just one organization alone. What happened is that many of these professions and jobs are starting to come together, whether it's a form of consulting firms, specialist firms, business process outsourcing firms, in order to grow that pool of specialty over time as well. And these are the same people who are also developing the robots and artificial intelligence that's also handling a lot of the work in outsourcing today, right? So if you think about it, if you're doing a job that is repetitive, very task-oriented, very rule-based, these are the jobs that are most likely to be taken over by robotics and automation. That is a fact. So what's left is pretty much what I said before. Either you're in technology or you're in the human or the people sort of space. Right? So hopefully that answers your question, Eugene.
Thank you. And for those of you who have done organizational behavior, that rings a few little bells. So we have another question from William. The information about principles was very interesting. How can we discern whether our principles are based on what is beneficial instead of blind faith?
Okay, that's an interesting question, William. We talk about beneficial instead of blind faith. And I don't think principles is something that you can just accept without thinking. Right? You've got to question a lot on what really drives you. So for example, a principle that I hold in doing work with my clients is that I don't sell something that I don't believe in. Right? I don't give advice that I don't believe in myself. So I'm not the sort of person that can sleep well at night being able to sell ice to an Eskimo. Right? So I don't do that. I think it's wrong. I don't sleep well at night if I do that. And I don't believe in what we call profits that are unrealistic, right? I believe in fairness, and I believe in that sort of trade, and that's what I abide by. And I came to discover this over time, right? I used to think that, yeah, where there's profit to be made, I'm smart, I go and get it, and that's great, right? But it was a feeling that it's not one that sat very well with me. And as I got to know more people, and I got to speak to more people and ask them about what drives them, why they make certain decisions, more things started to resonate with me in ways that I couldn't understand many years before, but I do understand to a certain extent more today. So it's not blind faith, and I'm not particularly religious myself. I am familiar with many other religions. To me, it's about, am I doing right by humanity? Right? Am I harming others? No. Am I helping others? Yes. Would I like to help others more? Very much so. So that's kind of where I kind of start from as well. So that, I guess, you can have the same set of principles, but have different behaviors manifesting out of different people, and that's okay. That's okay. How you interpret that and what guides you at that point in time could be different from situation to situation. But you're right. Blind faith, I don't think if you want to grow up, you should not accept anything just at face value. Do question it as much as you can in order for that to sit well within yourself.
Thank you, William. I hope that answered your question. And we have another question. They're worried about losing track as time goes by. So do you have any recommendations on how to keep working towards realizing your purpose while working in a job that just pays the bills in the meantime?
Especially if the current job market is limited, right? Well, time, the thing is, what do we mean by time? If you're in your early 20s, based on current life expectancy, you've got 50 to 60 more years to live. And I'll just give you an example where I don't think the time matters that much. So I did hire someone recently, well, that's like 2-3 years ago. And this was a person who came out of a relatively unknown university, didn't do too well in his studies, right? He basically flunked a few subjects, didn't know what he wanted to do when he was studying. He was still trying to discover what he liked. And he wasn't able to get into a corporate or firm that he wanted to at that point. So he took the first job offer that he got in a very small boutique consulting firm, and he worked there for 3 to 4 years, right? And what he learned there was that not just hard work, but also the work experience and the people that he worked with, he matured a lot. Right? And over time, he became somebody that eventually applied to the firm that I was working in. And when I interviewed this person, and even when I hired him on board and when he continued working, he became one of our top performers in the team, right? Through the sheer sense of maturity, the great resilience that he had, and that he's been there and done that. He's got a wide range of experience, both client-facing as well as work-related, and he knows what failure feels like, right? And that sort of grounded him around that, okay, no, he's not quite discovered his purpose just yet, but he knows that working with the right people is what motivates him to move forward, right? And regardless of the name of the company, whether it's the Accentures or Deloitte's or EY's or NAB or whatever big companies there are, Amazon, Google, that doesn't matter so much to him anymore, but it matters around the people he surrounds himself with that is helping him discover his purpose and meaning as to what he wants to do. It is a difficult one. I don't think everybody discovers that early on in life. Some may discover that much later in life. But those who do discover what their purpose is, ask themselves that question almost every day as to why do I do what I do? And for me personally, ever since I had my daughter, that also has given different perspective towards life as well, right? In my 20s, I was very much career-minded, career-focused, and I had a phrase that still rings true today. I kept telling people that kids destroy careers, right? And that is entirely true for a very good reason, that a career is only one part of your life as a whole. right? It might be the part that puts food on the table and pays the bills. And I think a lot of us will eventually get there to being able to pay the bills, right? And through some way or another. And once you've landed on that firm ground of paying the bills, you get to a state where you can achieve that self-actualization of meaning and purpose. Another one of my colleagues and a very good friend of mine that I know was very successful in consulting. He made partner, he was partner in the firm for quite a number of years, and he quit that entirely, right? He was making good money, but he felt that that sort of journey was not right for him anymore. And he pursued his passion in photography. So he's got his own photography business now in Singapore, and it's paying the bills, it is putting food on the table. He spent 2-3 years to set that up diligently, and it brings him so much joy in capturing moments. He only does photography, portraits of people, families, dogs, people, in the principle that these are things that people cherish and value and makes them happy. And so that's what makes him realize his own purpose as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, and that certainly relates to the 3 Ps. We have another question. What kind of practical skills do you recommend us to master in the post-COVID world?
Practical skills. So I would think that any new skill that you can gain is practical. I know it's a broad statement, but the example, it really hits home because during the lockdown period here in Malaysia, there was basically 2 months where I was stuck at home and not working. I was in between jobs before leaving EY and joining Deloitte. And I picked up new skills in the meantime. I'm not sure why, but I just did it. So I mentioned earlier that I'm an amateur magician. Yes, I picked up a few magic tricks and card tricks, largely to entertain my daughter. But I found that learning or picking up that skill in doing magic or sleight of hand help me in my consulting work as well, because that, even though it's quite disconnected, you might think, but being a magician, you need to know how the other party looks at it, right? You need to know the other point of view. You have to put yourself in the audience's shoes exactly from their perspective in order for the trick to work. If not, it doesn't. And in order for you to perform well in magic, you've got to rehearse and you've got to keep testing with an audience for you to keep getting better and get immediate feedback, right? And that, I think, in a lot of our careers, we stop doing that because we've got a big ego, we've got arrogant, we think we're very good, we think we can't learn anymore, and we stop asking for immediate feedback, right? And just in those 2 months, doing magic tricks, testing out with my kid and my wife, and then that whole practice will just ask you, how am I doing, right? Is this looking all right? Is that looking fine? Helps me so much in my own personal development, right? So, and as part of that as well, in the new skills that I picked up, it's YouTubing and doing vlogs, doing videos such as this, which made me a lot more comfortable speaking to a camera, even though I can't see you on the other end. And that is something that it's a skill. A lot of us are shy and feel a bit weird talking to a camera where there's nobody around, but that's essentially a good skill to have. And who knows, one day that you might be recording training videos of your own or sharing things online, and having this sort of skill set would help. So any new skill that adds on to your repertoire is practical, especially in these times. And you never know how all these things might connect over time. So thank you very much, Kenka. I hope I pronounced your name all right.
That's very interesting, and I'm not sure if that's what people were expecting, but there you go. There's a whole range of things you can master which will somehow impact on your work. Okay, this is a bit of a more personal question. So how do you balance life, health, work, study? There's so many facets. So how do you find that balance?
How do you find that balance? I think firstly, it's that it's life. There is nothing else, everything within life, right? So the whole concept of work-life balance, I think, is wrong, because it's as though work is not part of your life, whereas it is. It's a very big part of your life in that sense. So it's about how do you live in general, right? How do you remain healthy? How do you be contented, right, with what you have? How do you keep learning, keep progressing, and keep helping others, right? And balancing all that. So firstly, it's good to get into your head that it is life that you're living, and career, your job is a part of it. Your family is also a big part of it. The society that you live in is also a big part of it. And it goes on, right? And that's life as you progress. How I live my life in my teens and how I live my life in my 20s is quite different from how I live my life in my 30s. And it's going to be different in how I live in my 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and if I live that long, 80s, 90s. Right? So it's all about living at the end of the day. And the part about balancing all the different aspects of your life at that point in time, it's, if you think about balls that you're juggling, right? And this is a very good lesson in leadership that someone shared with me several years ago, that I personally took as one of the best advice of leadership that I ever got. A true leader, and this is not just leaders of large corporates, but leaders of yourself as well, that you have to lead your own self. A true leader would be able to tell you what sits on the plate or what must stay on the plate and what can fall off the plate, right? And if you think about juggling as an act, right, you have balls to juggle. There are certain balls that are made of glass, and there are certain balls that are made of plastic. Right? And in life, you're juggling not 2 or 3 balls, you're juggling 50, 60, 70 balls at the same time, of which only a handful of them, 3, 4, 5 of them, are made of glass, and the rest are made of plastic. So you have to answer for yourself, which are your glass balls that you need to keep, and which are you okay with it falling off and picking up the very next day, right? Because it's plastic, you'll be okay the next day. So that's a mindset that I think we all need to have around this notion of moving away from work-life balance towards how do you live your life. So hopefully that answers your question. I didn't get a name for that. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be thinking about what my glass balls are. Okay, so if we have time, very quickly, 2 more questions. So,
Okay.
Yunhan, are there any common mistakes that you've noticed people making during the transition into the post-COVID era?
All right. Thanks a lot, William, for that question. Now, common mistakes, if you mean by not adhering to standard operating procedures, yes, that's a lot of that happening today, that transitioning to post-COVID, we sort of think that everything is back to normal when it's not. And I think we're still not post-COVID, actually, to tell you the truth. And people are, I think the biggest mistake now is thinking that we are already past this when we're not. Similarly to whether it's the Spanish flu or the Great Depression, it took a few years to come out of it, and the effects of it are really unknown for a few years to come. And the repercussions of COVID-19 are still unknown, even the years or the next decade to come. So honest to truth, I think if we think we are past this, I think that's wrong. We're not. We have to really be cautious about how do we embrace what's going in this new normal. And it's really new. And just an example of the work that I'm doing now, I've not had a chance to meet many clients face to face, and it's a complete different thing as compared to what I've done before. And it's new. There's a lot of mistakes that we'll likely make in this scenario. I'm involved in a project of delivering a HR system to about 11,000 employees globally to a company that it's being done completely virtually, right? And it's not been done in this fashion ever before. We don't know whether it's going to be successful, but the mantra is that we've got to at least try and know that we're not out of this, and know that everyone's also pretty much in the same boat as it is. So thanks, William, for that very insightful question, and do keep the questions coming. If you'd like to connect with me, happy to have a chat as well. So I think we'll move on to the last question, or a couple of questions, I think, Jane?
Yes, yeah. So I think it's a really nice question to end on. Do you have any tips for entering the job market post-COVID?
Entering the job market post-COVID, right? I think that's also linked to the question that Kenneth is also asking on changing our strategy of entering the job market? How long do you think it will take for companies to adjust their expectations and requirements from us, future candidates? So there are a couple of perspectives here that companies now are also at a loss. And those companies who are responding, I believe, are the ones who are going to come out of this tops, right? I know of companies that have still not embraced the work from home concept, and I'm not asking for help, and they are losing people, right? Because you've got, they hire people who are living at home with their parents, for example, who are aging, or they may have young kids, and working for a company that does not care for their well-being is something that is putting off a lot of employees. So I think that's one big mistake that corporates are making, that they're not adjusting, or they're not trying at least to connect with people and adjust as part of this period. Likewise for employees coming into this as well, right? It's about knowing what's out there and also adjusting your expectations coming into the job market as it is. In the past, the career path was quite set. If I can score myself in a big accounting firm or big conglomerate or big bank somewhere, right, or one of the Googles and Amazons of the world, I'm set. Right? But increasingly, we're not seeing that as the case. And even the millennials and now the Gen Zs who are coming up, they have so many different hats or roles that they play. The ones who are coming out ahead of the curve, as I see, are those who are constantly experimenting, trying out different things, right? And gaining a lot of new skills along the way. Now, not just skills, but also networks, people. Increasingly, work is done a lot through people. So your friends, your university mates, your connections that you have when you did at internships, nurture those, right? You never know where they might take you, whether it's the next few months or 5-10 years down the road. Your connections are the people that you meet. And the world is always so small, right? So you talk about 6 degrees of separation. Now with the COVID world, everyone is just a Zoom call away. And I, a few weeks ago, connected with one of my old university mates, whom I've not spoken to for 15 years. And both of us were very active in, back then it was called the Melbourne University Overseas Student Service, MUOS as we were short. And he's from Botswana. And we just connected, spoke for 1.5 hours, right? As though no time has passed, just catching up on times. And you never know where things might take you, right? And now we're exploring collaboration opportunities as to where we can help each other out from a career perspective as well. So I think it's really working through people, right? And maintaining those networks and relationships and nurturing those over time. So thank you, Kenneth, for that question, and also the other person around tips. Hopefully that's helpful. I know we're out of time, but I did enjoy this session sharing with you. Hopefully that session was good and you took a few things away as well. So thank you very much, Jane and Bree, for inviting me for this session. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Yuan Han. We really appreciate you coming here. And as we said, it's an excellent opportunity. You are in Malaysia. We're in Australia, and so there's definitely benefits of this new world that we're seeing, because we do get some wonderful speakers like yourself to come in. I would just like to quickly share my screen, which will just outline the other sessions we have coming up this week. So we have international business etiquette. So Yuan Han mentioned how networking is such an important, we're going to give you the hot tips for that tomorrow. Then in the evening, we do have a panel of HR professionals from across the globe, and they will be sharing what the different market trends are happening in their areas. Then we have an alumni and career panel, so you will be able to ask your questions to people who have not long been in your shoes and are now out in the workforce across the globe. And finally, some more etiquette of the what to do and what not to do in business settings. So do you eat the food at networking, but then you won't be able to shake hands, although you're not really meant to do that anymore anyway. That is it for today. And once again, I would like to say a huge thank you to you, Yuan Han. I'm going to keep those 3 Ps in mind for my future career also.